Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're fine. I'm also okay. Welcome to this episode of Raw Politics, where we want to pick a few lessons from the political predicaments of the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua. If that is a subject you are interested in, stay tuned. If you're watching for the first time, please take a moment, subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss similar videos. Now, it is exactly 1 week since Professor Kindiki Kithure was sworn in, which also ultimately sealed the political fate of the former Deputy President, the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua. The question is, what lessons can we pick from what happened to Rigathi, or how he handled the situation? Because politics is always providing us with lessons. What is it that we can learn from the predicaments of Rigathi Gachagua, especially is impeachment? As I've said in a previous video, I'm persuaded Rigathi Gachagua impeached himself. Not that he voted to get himself out of office, but he did everything possible to ensure that there was no other option but to impeach him. I explained that when Rigathi Gachagua took over, he was focused on delivering the plan. Then a few months later, he changed his focus. And now his main focus was to be the kingpin of Mount Kenya. There's nothing wrong with that. However, when you add that to now fighting your boss in real life, fighting Dr. Ruto, that was a big mistake. And so Ruto had to look for someone else to work with, considering that you can't deliver the plan without having a deputy that is supportive. Ruto learned this firsthand, that when there was political conflict in the second term of Uhuru Kenyatta, when Uhuru Kenyatta changed his focus from the Big Four to BBI, there is nothing that was delivered. And so when he saw that his deputy had changed his focus from the better agenda, the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, to something else, William Ruto had to look for someone. That is why I'm saying Rigathi impeached himself. But that is not the issue here. The issue is, what can we learn from what he did? The first lesson that comes to mind, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll just share 5, though there are several. You can also add those in the comment section. But the first lesson that comes to mind is that you should never misunderstand your job description. Anytime you are employed somewhere, please try your level best to understand what your job description is. What are the powers that comes with that job? What are the restrictions that come with that job? Never create new description once you've been given the job. Just stick to what you are told. For instance, the Constitution of Kenya states clearly that the Deputy President, in Article 147, that the Deputy President of the Republic is a principal assistant to the president. He does what the president tells him, in short. So he does not have substantive role, like clearly detailed in the Constitution, that the deputy president will be doing this and this and this and this. No. It is said that he will deputize the president. He will be the principal assistant to the president. Meaning, if the president tells him, go and do this, he goes and does that. But when Rigathi got into power, I think he was misled to think that he was a co-president. He misunderstood being on the ticket to mean that they shared the same mandate. You see, the Constitution of 2010 ensured that we had a deputy president that was elected, meaning it was not going to be very easy for the president to fire. Before that, a president would fire a deputy or a vice president whenever they liked. And so, for purposes of sanity, political sanity, the framers of the Constitution put that requirement that you nominate your running mate way before elections are done. You campaign with this particular running mate, and then once you are elected, this becomes your principal assistant. Rigathi misunderstood that. He was persuaded that he was actually a co-president, and not just that. Based on his statements, he was also persuaded that he was better than President Ruto. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the lesson number one that we learn here is always understand your job description. Because when you don't, you will be doing what is not your job description, and very soon you become irrelevant. And that is what happened to Rigathi. He started doing things that are not his job, and he became irrelevant. The second lesson that comes to mind very fast is never overestimate your support. Never overestimate your support base. So there are leaders in this country who have supporters, tribal support base. People like Raila Odinga, people like William Ruto, they can actually tell their people, maybe their tribesmen, to go this direction, and they will do that without questions. Rigathi also believed that within that short time, he had become like also a kingpin of sort of the Kikuyus, and he overestimated his support base. Remember when Rigathi was asked during an interview on Citizen on issues to do with impeachment, he was categorical that an attempt to impeach him will leave the country in chaos. That is something he said proudly. Actually, according to Rigathi, it was the entire country would be in chaos. He was persuaded that he had a support base of 7.2 million. You remember he would say, I was elected by 7.2 million people, and so any attempt to remove me from office will lead to chaos. He overestimated his support base. He thought that he had serious support. What Rigathi had not considered, in my opinion, is that even when Ruto picked him, he was not that popular. He's not like Rigathi was the spokesperson of the Kikuyus when Ruto was picking him. No, he was a nobody then. He was just a one-time MP from Madeira who had been very vocal and a supporter of William Ruto. And based on his mobilization skills and the fact that he was really vocal, President Ruto picked him to help with the delivery of the plan. And he would explain the plan, and once he was elected, he was focused on that for a while. But he didn't know that, but Rigathi confused that goodwill that he was getting from the Kikuyus as some fanatic support. So that's why he would claim that should he be removed from office, there would be chaos. There was nothing. It was so bad that Rigathi himself now had to turn the tables and say that people expected that there would be chaos. No, it was not people expected. It is him who said that. It is him who made that claim publicly, saying that it will destabilize the nation. But that was not to happen. And so he overestimated the support he had. I'm not saying that Rigathi does not have a following currently in Mount Kenya, but it has not reached that fanatic support because Mount Kenya is still divided on who to to give their allegiance to. There are some who are still saying Uhuru is their king. There are others who are saying Rigathi is their man. But then you see Rigathi has also made things worse by claiming that Uhuru is their king. So these people are still feeling that they're still not at that position where the mountain is decided that Rigathi Gachagua is one of their own and an attempt on Rigathi's attempt on them all. That is what Rigathi had and the leaders around him started to say, that any attempt to try to impeach Rigathi or to do anything to him meant that you were doing it to Mulima. And so he overestimated his support base. Number three, the third lesson that we can pick from here is that you should never pick unnecessary wars. It is bad enough to pick a war, but going ahead to pick an unnecessary war is something that we should all learn from. Rigathi Gachagua had his political future guaranteed. And I want you to understand this, ladies and gentlemen, when I say that he had his political future guaranteed. This is what I meant. When President Ruto nominated Rigathi Gachagua, he made it abundantly clear. And he told people that he intends to serve with Rigathi Gachagua for 2 terms, after which both of them were to retire. Rigathi, on the other hand, once he got into office, decided that the first thing he needs to do is to bring Ruto down. So he picked a war that he was neither capable of winning and one that was not worth it at all. Because remember, I always maintain that when you want to pick a war, let's say you've chosen that is what you want to do, you want to pick a war. If you are to pick a war, you should ask yourself simple questions. Number one is, can I win? And number two, is it worth it? So you don't just pick a war. Is it something you can win? And even if you can win, is that victory worth it? Because some victory will leave you so wounded that after a few months you are also succumbing to the injury. So it will not be worth it. That is what Rigathi did. He picked a war that he was not going to win, but that was also not worth it at all. And you can blame this on ego or misunderstanding what his roles were, and maybe listening to enemies clothed as friend. And so Rigathi picked a war with Ruto. He was persuaded this is something he could win, but I believed he could not win this at all. Winning against William Ruto is not very easy, ladies and gentlemen. Ask Uhuru and Raila. They were a combined force against William Ruto. William Ruto was the underdog in the 2022 elections, yet he still won the election. So both Raila and Uhuru know who Ruto is, but somehow somebody told Rigathi that it was now better than these two forces combined, and it was going to actually remove Ruto from power through maybe anarchy or these funny rhetorics that he had in the mountain. He picked unnecessary war. That is one lesson we should learn. Never pick unnecessary war. And even if you are to pick any war, ask yourself, is it something you can win? And most importantly, is it something that is worth your effort? Lesson number 4, ladies and gentlemen, is that Rigathi Gachagua underestimated his opponents. Most of the problems that politicians find themselves in is making the mistake of underestimating your opponent. You remember during the campaigns of 2022, Kibisho would go to Citizen. Musheru would go to Citizen. They would talk boldly that election would be won by over 60-something%, that this was a walkover. They have underestimated Ruto. They looked at him as someone who they were going to crush. And for that reason, they were shocked when he won. It's the same thing that the Democrats did with Trump. They were like, this is a convicted felon. There is no way this person can defeat Kamala. And remember, Kamala has the support of media, all the celebrity, everybody. And so they were like, Trump cannot win. Even in their polls, they were like, Trump cannot defeat Kamala. Yet, on the election day, Kamala has lost badly. Has lost in ways that you can't even believe. And so, underestimating your opponent is the worst mistake you can ever do. Rigathi Gachagua underestimated Ruto. To quote him, he believed that he was a better leader than Ruto, that Ruto was in office because of him. He said that while in, I think, Kirinyaga somewhere, where he was asking the crowd, would you have elected this person if it were not for me? And the crowd was like, no. And Rigathi believed that. He was even in meetings where they were singing Ruto had to go. He underestimated who Ruto was, to the point that he believed he was somebody who was just going to bully and get rid of as soon as possible. That was never to happen. Rigathi found himself home. He found himself impeached. The way these people said they would impeach Rigathi within 2 weeks. He was impeached. The court had already done their work, and Rigathi found himself home. Even if he was to go through court and try to do what the way Kinasonko are telling him, the opponent that he picked is the wrong one. That is why my advice to Rigathi remains that take your time. Do an introspection. Sit down with yourselves. Forget these enemies clothed as friends. People who in reality hate you but are pretending to encourage you and cheer you on as you go down a cliff. Sit down with yourself and just take a moment and say, this is where the rain started beating me, and I've learned from my mistakes. I will do better next time. And then find a way of reaching out to the president, because Ruto does not hate Rigathi. I can tell you for sure. It pains him that Rigathi had to go. You may not believe this, but that is the truth. It pains him because William Ruto does not like politics that a disruptive politics. He wants to work with his friends for the longest time, because Rigathi believes in the bottom up. He understood it better. So working with him without interference and without even interfering with Mount Kenya would have been in the best interest of William Ruto. So letting Rigathi go was really painful event for him, but one that was very necessary, considering that Rigathi had made it sure that he was either going to sabotage government from within or waste the entire 3 years fighting Ruto. So nothing was going to be done. You would launch her, you would oppose it, you would try to do this, you would oppose it. And considering he was sitting in cabinet, that was making things very difficult. Now, he underestimated his opponent. And I think he has learned that lesson, that you never underestimate your opponent. Now, the fifth one is a tricky, is a very funny one, but a lesson that all of us should never, should always, should pick from Rigathi. There are people who are your enemies in real life, but who would pretend to be your friends so that they can bring you down. Don't ever pick. The number 5 lesson here is don't ever trust your enemies, even if they now claim they are your friends. Don't ever take advice from people who did not like you, even when they now confess their undying love for you. Never in life, whether it is in politics, whether it is in real life. People who already made it clear that they didn't like you. I'm not talking of small differences. I'm talking of fundamental differences. People who want you out. Don't ever do that, because you will ultimately lose. Let me give you examples. Rigathi Gachagua is the one who rendered Uhuru Kenyatta useless politically in the mountain. Uhuru wanted to sustain Jubilee, form some rebellion in Mount Kenya through Jubilee, and give Ruto a hard time. Rigathi neutralized Jubilee within months. It rendered Uhuru Kenyatta useless. To make matters worse, Uhuru Kenyatta's farm were attacked, and the claims were that all this was organized by Rigathi Gachagua. When that Uhuru Kenyatta sends you his people to become your advisors, the Ngunjiri Wambugu, pretending now to like Rigathi more than everybody else. Uhuru sending his bloggers to start calling Rigathi Baba Boys and etc. Never trust such people, because what they did, they found Rigathi harboring these feelings of being better than Ruto, and all they did was to amplify it. They would go out there, they would insult Ruto and praise Rigathi. The likes of Ngunjiri will tell Rigathi, you can actually get rid of Ruto. It is even found, even the DCI found out that some MPs around Rigathi even went as far as mobilizing youth in the so-called Gen Zs to overthrow Ruto. So, and these are people who did not like Rigathi Gachagua. Let me ask you a question. This Kahiga, the Mutai Kahiga, the governor for Nyeri, how does he benefit from a strong Rigathi, considering that was his last term? If Rigathi is very strong in the mountain and is powerful, how does it benefit Kahiga? It doesn't. So what would he do? He would pretend to be Rigathi's best friend, incite him to the into the ditch, and once Rigathi was in the ditch, you saw him saying he has no particular problem with President Ruto. Yet this is the person who was saying Ruto will know who they are. Now that Rigathi has been impeached, Kahiga is very quiet. He's not saying come and buy. Ngunjiri has gone silent. Okay? These are the people who are telling Rigathi that any attempt on you is an attempt on Mount Kenya and the Kenya will burn. And he believed that. These are people who never liked Rigathi one bit. Ngunjiri believed he lost his seat because of the campaign Rigathi led in Nyeri. And for that reason, to think that Ngunjiri has now seen the light and has come back to help you, that was so naive of Rigathi Gachagua. In life, don't take advice from those who were once your enemy, however much they pretend to be friends. Don't ever. That is one lesson we should learn from Rigathi. The people who brought Rigathi down are people who were pretending to be his closest friend because they incited him. They made him even chant Ruto must go. And that was something that he was not going to come back from. So, ladies and gentlemen, if anything, we have learned 5 lessons from Rigathi's political predicaments. Number 1, we have said, always understand what your job description is. It is very important. Understand your job description. It will save you a lot of trouble. Number 2, don't overestimate your support base. Never. Don't overestimate your support base. Thinking that you have more, that people are willing to go extra mile because of you, when you've not seen that in reality, is a very bad way to live your life. Don't ever overestimate the support. And I can also repeat, don't underestimate your opponent. Underestimating the likes of Ruto, that is a very grave mistake. And it has cost Rigathi badly. Okay? He underestimated Ruto. And of course, another lesson is don't pick unnecessary wars. And finally, don't pick enemies as advisors. Never. Don't confuse your enemies for friends. Those are the 5 lessons I could pick from what has happened to Rigathi. If you have others, you can add in the comment section below. And if you found this video useful, drop a like and share it with friends. Otherwise, let us meet in the next video.